Next up, we're going to see another very common selector, the ID selector. So if you can think back to when we first covered forms and inputs and labels, we talked about how we associate a label with an input. We use the ID attribute on the input, and then on the label, which I actually don't have here, but I could add one quickly, for, how about search, and that will be our label text. I need an ID here that says search. So I have connected this label to this input. Let's go back to our window, click, and I now can focus in on that input, and this is more accessible for screen readers. Now, if you don't like how this looks, there are ways of still making it screen reader accessible while hiding this, but we're not going to worry about that for now. The point is, we've seen IDs, but they have another use, not just to associate a label with an input, but we can use IDs on any element in order to provide a hook for our CSS to single out a single element. So an ID is something we can add on in our HTML as an attribute anytime we need to be able to style one thing differently. For example, I've got a bunch of buttons on this page. Log in, sign up, vote, 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 and right now I'm styling them exactly the same, but maybe I want this login button or the sign up button to look different. Maybe I want it to have a dark background color with light text, and I want this one to have a light background color with dark text or something like that. Speaking of which, I'm going to be using a color palette here. It's going to look terrible, but I like this website, Coolers. You can explore, if you click here, you can explore trendy or trending color palettes. You can also generate your own. It has a nice interface. There's a whole tutorial. It's a little app where you can pick a color, you can freeze it, you can randomly get a new color. Anyway, so I'm going to redo some of these colors very quickly. Let's take this background color, and I'm going to comment out this selector. I'm going to give my body a background color of that, and it looks like it does not copy with a hash sign or octothorpe. Okay, and then I'll also copy that darkish color, and I'm going to use that for our H1s and H2s. That will be our color there. I'll paste that. All right, and then I'm going to make all of my buttons have a lighter background color, like maybe this color right here. So all buttons, background dash color, just like that. Again, I'm just copying those colors. Okay, so there's that. And then what I'd like to do is make this sign up button have actually the inverse. I want it to have a dark background color. So I'm going to use this color here. And I need to be able to select that one button. Right now we're selecting all buttons. So I'm going to add an ID to that one button. Again, this makes no visual impact, at least not yet. It's purely just a hook for me in my CSS to refer to this button. So why don't we give it an easy name like sign up or register or something like that. Generally, IDs should not have spaces. I like to keep them as short as possible while still making them meaningful. And then over in our CSS, we use this exact syntax, the hash sign, the octothorpe, the pound symbol, and then the name of the ID. So for us, that is sign up. And then I want the background color of that button, if I can type it here, to be this color that I just have on my clipboard. It's just a dark color. So I'm going to refresh. There we go. This one button and only this button has that color. And I'm also going to give it lighter text. So I want this color. Maybe I'll just do the very light off-white color. So I'll set the text color, make sure I include that hash symbol, and refresh again. Okay. So I have singled out that one sign up button using an ID. Another very, very important thing to know about IDs is that only one thing on the page should have any given ID. So search, it should only be used once. Sign up, only used once. The whole idea is that it's singling out one thing. It's a unique identifier. So that's pretty much it for the ID selector. You add an ID to your markup, and then you reference it using the name of the ID and the hash sign, octothorpe, pound symbol, whatever you want to call it, in front of the ID. So no space or anything like that. Of course, this is very different than using a hexadecimal color. Yeah, it's the same character there, but a very different meaning in CSS. Also, just one thing to highlight here, it can be tempting to use IDs a lot, but there are other selectors we'll be learning. You want to try and keep them to a minimum, but that doesn't mean you should avoid using them. you just don't want to spam them all over the place to style everything differently, there are other strategies and approaches. So I'm not trying to scare you away from using them. I'm just saying don't have thousands on a page or hundreds. No, that's even over the top. I usually wouldn't have more than a handful on a single page, but that's just my personal approach. And we'll see something in the next video that I use far more often, something called a class. So that's coming up next.